This is Jacques Santucci, president of Opus Consulting, a business performance management firm.
And this is Don Martelli, Chief Operating Officer of the Belfort Group, an integrated digital marketing and PR agency. Welcome to the Reinvent Videocast, a real-time exploration of how to successfully manage disruption in business.
There's many reasons why businesses are disrupted: global market performance, competition, pandemic, and much more. Reinvent will feature interviews with experts across a range of industries who will share tips you can transfer to your business. Our contacts, our friends, your friends, Reinvent New England.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Reinvent Videocast here. I'm joined with some friends of mine here talking about a variety of topics in business, but today I'm going to pass it off to my friend Jacques, who will introduce our guest.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Our guest today is Scott Moskal from Boston. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. So thank you for allowing me to be, your guinea pig or one of your first guests. But as they said, my name is Scott Moskal. I'm a partner at the law firm of Burns&Levinson. Burns&Levinson has about 125 lawyers, mostly based in Boston, both a national practice. We specialize in corporate and commercial transactions and litigation, as well as have a very large intellectual property practice. At Burns&Levinson, I chair our restructuring group, which is obviously very timely these days, given what's going on in the economy, as well as I chair our cannabis practice. And so we've been, We've been in the cannabis space since 2013. And we started off, frankly, in a deal that's how I met Jacques. So a deal in Rhode Island. And since that time, we've grown, we've expanded. We have about 15 folks practicing in our group with about 8 dedicated, almost 100% full time. We represent operators, multi-state operators, regional, single state startups. But we also represent a lot of folks who are in the ancillary company department, like packaging. We represent lighting, et cetera, et cetera. We have a pretty good niche in the banking financial arena. So we represent and work with several debt funds that are providing debt to cannabis companies, and as well as hemp and CBD, as well as a nationally recognized banking practice where we work with banks and credit unions across the country in assisting them in navigating the complexities dealing with taking cannabis deposits, but also helping them set up, certain limited lending programs, DACA programs, et cetera, et cetera. So we like to think at Burns, as opposed to vertical, we are horizontal and we cover the entire industry.
Well, Scott, you and I, we actually have a lot in common, personally, but also, business-wise. We both work in the business insolvency world, and then also in the cannabis world, which, these days sometimes seems to be colliding a little bit. But, we are in June 2020. I think the first question we'd like to ask you in our Reinvent New England is, what has changed in your practice, in your professional service practice since the beginning of the year?
Obviously we're remote, and even though, we're slowly reopening the economy and whatnot, for the most part, most of our lawyers are still remote. So it has taught us different ways to work together, I think. Whereas in the old days, you could walk down the hall, talk to a colleague, have a meeting. That isn't as easy these days unless they live next door. And so, I think Zoom and Microsoft Teams has become, the new conference call type situation. And I think that's one of the major ways we're trying to adapt to this situation. And as much as I would like to believe, by July 1st, we can all be back in the office and the way things go back as normal, I don't think that's probably going to happen for a variety of reasons. And so I think what I would say is we need to learn and we're trying to learn how to adapt to new environment and new realities.
Great. What about servicing your clients? Obviously, it's I think all three of us are in the people business, if you will, and typically we'd be doing this over a cup of coffee at one international place or thereabouts. So, how about client service? How are you managing the client workload and continuing to build those relationships with clients despite being distance, if you will?
I've got the cup of coffee though.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a Diet Pepsi, if that counts.
There you go.
In certain ways, it hasn't changed that much. Our client base is national. So, so yesterday I was on a call with some folks from California. So that hasn't changed. I think what has changed is sort of in-person meetings. So having, local clients come in, doing that face-to-face, and even with technology platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, it's just not the same, right? So I think that one way it hasn't changed, but one way it has. So I think also, in the past, I have found that if you have a dispute, it's a great way to deal with disputes, whether business or litigation, is for folks to get into a room and hash it out. Yes, that's somewhat possible with this technology, but it's just not the same. So, again, I think the watchword here is adapt. And, lawyers are notoriously conservative and we're resistant to change. I still see that in our firm. And, that said, we have to learn to adapt to these new, not requirements, but new realities.
Sure.
So your practice is probably also changing, right? In the past few weeks.
Yes.
How's business development? Are the clients the same, or are you seeing a change in the type of clients or request?
So, I'm a bankruptcy restructuring lawyer originally. And then, starting in, 2013, we started transitioning more and more to the cannabis space. I still have some workout deals on the side of the cannabis clients, but certainly since, the end of March, there's so many more inquiries, whether it's from, operators, customers, whatnot, and or their lenders, dealing with the economic realities, right? So I think that certainly has seen my practice has changed. I don't know if that's for the better or for the worse. But at the same time, I haven't really seen a decrease in the cannabis work. I think, and that's because we're servicing our present clients. We're still getting some calls here and there, and we've been engaged by some new clients. But obviously, in this new reality, it's a little different than the old days where, for instance, I used to speak at least once or twice a month at a cannabis conference or symposium. And now, obviously, that's not happening. And one of the benefits of speaking is, obviously I could do a webinar, but you don't have that in-person contact, which I found the benefit of speaking in terms of networking, meeting new people, like after you give your talk. And I think, that has altered, I guess, our business plan in many ways.
I agree. We're all humans, right? And one of the good part of being human is that human contact, that relationship, and that's what's missing now, which probably going to lead to new ways of dealing with this, beside the health issue. But I've been on webinars. I've done webinars myself. What's missing, I agree, is that the networking part, that meeting people, hearing their problems, creating opportunities for all of us. And do you think that maybe we're going to see some new innovative ideas on the market that's actually going to try to mitigate that change?
One would hope so. So let me actually give you a good example. So Burns and Levinson has an annual conference for cannabis, and it's always in October. And Jacques, you've been a speaker, or your wife has been a speaker at all three of them. So this year, we actually just had a meeting about this, and we're trying to determine, will the state allow 400 people to go into one ballroom? Will people fly? Will people want to go, in those close quarters? And we came to the conclusion that probably not. So what we're doing is we are reworking the concept of a conference, a small regional one, not tens of thousands, but we get about 400 people. And we're trying to figure out, so it's easy enough to have the panels electronically. That's simple enough. But one of the things that we always pride ourselves at these conferences is that we aim to introduce everyone to someone else. So I think, without hyperbole, almost everyone who came to our conference had met someone new they had never worked with before. And whether that turned into a business relationship or client relationship, I don't know. But I can almost guarantee at least there was follow-up and there were potential networking and business opportunities. So how do we sort of simulate a networking opportunity like that? And that's what we're working on. So we're looking at different concepts like smaller groups. So you start off in a giant Zoom and try to have groups of 5 or 6 where we match people together, so they're from different industries, with someone from the team, our team, moderating, for instance. I don't know how well that will work. I've attended certain Zoom networking calls where you have 6 to 8 people. And like anything else, it kind of depends on what they give, and in terms of the experience themselves. So, and we're trying to work on other ways to revolutionize or change the way we did our conference. And, one thing we're trying to do is, we know a lot of capital providers. And so what we're trying to do, especially since no one has to fly in, is have such capital providers be there on a panel, and then have some type of process where anyone who's looking for capital or debt or equity there's some type of process where they might be able to meet individually in a separate room one of these folks, and maybe there's a business relationship to be had, maybe there isn't. In other contexts, these are very it's the whole speed dating concept. So oftentimes you'll mix and match in a room, and you have 15 minutes to talk to someone, and then if there's some interest, you follow up. It's how do you replicate that in-person experience through technology? And I think that's really causing us to adapt and really rethink how do we create networking opportunities, not just for ourselves, but for our clients, our customers, our friends, our referral sources. Did I answer that question? Was I too
You did.
long?
Yeah, you did. I was just typing out some notes. I had some follow-up questions. I mean, I think, we talked about earlier in our sort of preamble here about disruption, and I think that, it happens in business on many scales all day long, I'd say, especially in my business, when I have, not just one group of folks I work with all day long, but I have 35 different clients across different industries. And I think about the cannabis space in particular, and obviously it's near and dear to both of your hearts here because you're in that space. I mean, how have things changed in that space at all because of what's going on with the pandemic, as it relates to your professional lens?
Yeah, I think, well, like probably most service providers, some of our clients are having cash issues. So certainly trying to get paid in a timely fashion. But the same token, whereas in, a year ago, if you were having issues with payment, you'd call a client and you'd be like, hey, we have to go pencils down unless you pay us, you owe us 4 months, blah, blah, blah. Now it's a little difficult to do that because of the pandemic, and you just don't know, are people, or healthy? Are they dealing with a pandemic issue themselves? How has the overall economic, recession or situation impacted them personally as to whether they can support the business itself? So, certainly that has created lots of, I would say, consternation on our end. And I think as a result, going forward, we are trying to really sort of gauge our clients as to what is their real ability to pay their bills going forward. And we're asking for higher retainers as a result to sort of safeguard against that.
Sure.
Another thing we're doing, so in the law practice, there's a lot of filing fees, whether you're forming a new corporation, getting a tax certificate, filing something to land evidence courts. And so now we're requiring clients to give us a credit card just for all those costs. So those are hard costs. So in terms of billed hours that we don't collect, not that it's a good thing, that it is what it is. It's not like money out of our pocket technically, but when we're accumulating thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of hard costs, in any given month, we just can't at this point front that money for folks.
Yep.
So yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you see any trends coming, changing, any trends, in the industry, or you and I, we talked about, unfortunately, maybe on the insolvency side, what do you see?
Yeah, so let's take the cannabis industry, and I think this is actually there's a parallel in the non-cannabis industry, especially in this workout world. What we are seeing is that those groups who have money or access to money or liquidity, they're basically in a buying spree. They're going to buy up distressed companies or acquire distressed assets. And certainly many groups who thought that, in the startup mode, we got a couple of licenses, we'll go out, we'll borrow money, or, our friends and family had said, oh yeah, we can, let you raise $1 million through our networks. Well, those are gone, or severely diminished right now because of both the pandemic and the economy. And so consequently, you're seeing a lot more groups wanting to sell. I think the trend, I don't know if it's a trend or a problem, is the buyers want to buy, cheap, whereas the sellers think that their assets are worth, 2x. So we're waiting for equilibrium to occur in the market where, the buyer's expectations meet the seller's expectations, but there's a lot of tire kicking going on. And I think there's a similar situation going on in just the regular non-cannabis economy, where distressed acquisitions, there are distressed vulture funds, there are distressed, M&A, PE groups. And I think at the end of the day, we'll see this occur for the next year to 2 years. Even as the economy improves, there's always repercussions, there'll be distress. And so I think that's certainly one trend that we're going to see. I think another trend a good trend, is that cannabis is often compared to alcohol and tobacco, which are counter-cyclical. So people generally keep drinking or smoking. And, we believe that the same is holding true for cannabis. Granted, we've seen sales skyrocket at the beginning and now they've come down to earth. But at least those industries are open. So what we think may occur is folks who are in the non-cannabis industry, maybe investing in, like, maybe they had a shop that invested in restaurants. Well, restaurants and retail and tourism really has issues right now. So maybe they will turn their attention to cannabis. Secondly, I think we're going to see a lot of more states legalize cannabis, whether medicinally or recreationally or adult use. Listen, all the states are in a huge shortfall in their budgets. The national government, we're giving out trillions for the CARES Act. That money has to be recouped somewhere. And by legalizing cannabis, which usually has a very, hefty surcharge, at least at the recreational level, for taxation, cities, states can, I don't want to say refill their coffers, but it's a new source of income that they can assess and use for, to plug these deficiencies and deficits. we're starting to see, New York, Como has said, oh, he hopes they could get something passed for the end of the year, likely 2021. New Jersey, Connecticut, New Mexico. You're hearing a lot of states really pushing to open up, and I think that will drive business as well. Hopefully to us. Including you,
Yeah,
Jacques.
agreed. Yeah, I think for the collective three of us here in the service business, I think the only thing that really has changed is how we're helping our clients maneuver in the disruption, right? Because I think we're still delivering what we deliver. For us as an integrated marketing communications agency, it's still about communications and marketing. It just has changed the rules of engagement a little bit. Especially if, as we deal with media, for example, reporters that have typically covered, real estate, for example, might have been shifted over to cover COVID for a little bit. So just be sensitive to, what's happening with our clients. And the other thing I would add, I'd love to get your opinion on this too, is sort of the value of relationships. I think more so now, it's the gold standard of driving business, but which is hard to do when you can't, physically high five and say hello to people, other than through a video screen. But finding touch points and creating and maintaining that connectivity to your clients and driving opportunities because of that is super, super important. So I'd love to get your take on that too.
Yeah. So certainly at the beginning, when COVID first hit, especially law firms, but probably all service providers, there was 14 webinars a day. COVID, how to deal, the PPP loans. And yes, we participated and had some of our own, but to a certain extent, those got lost in the shuffle, I think, to a bit. And so what we've also done is reached out individually to, the head, the decision makers, or those folks that we have the relationships with the clients. How are you doing? How are you making out? Actually asking folks personally how they're doing, but also, is there something we can do for you in this, other than write off the entire bill, but is there something we can do for you? And I think one of the things that Burns has always tried to do is connect people. So that's a way, I think, that personal connection. So, hey, what do you need? Oh, you're looking for, maybe someone's looking to, buy your license. You have an extra cultivation. All right, let's call around and maybe introduce you to some folks that might be interested. Or, okay, you're looking for a bank account. So we represent a few banks or credit unions that are providing cannabis deposits. I'll call my contact there and get you a fast track, right? Things of that nature. And I think it's the smaller things that people will remember and appreciate at the end of the day. It's not how many webinars or Zoom cocktail hours you're doing, because those get, like I said earlier, they get lost in the shuffle, according to me. I think it's continuing to provide the good quality, but also just continuing to check in with your clients. We can't take anything for granted anymore, nor should we. And nor should we have in the past, but sometimes we have, because business was booming. I will say this, fortunately, I haven't really seen a decrease in that much business on my end between cannabis and insolvency, but certainly, in non-cannabis traditional M&A and lending, that is completely, downward trajectory.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying. Don and I, we came up with that idea of a short format video, with the idea that we need to connect with our friends and we need to give them a platform to say how they're doing and how they're changing. So thanks for, joining us. And I also agree with what you're saying, where, in my case, with our consulting practice, performance management, on the cannabis side, it hasn't really slowed down because it's still a strong industry, although it's changing rapidly and there's a lot of things evolving. And unfortunately, on the business management side, with the insolvency, feels like, it's coming our way. And a lot of companies are wondering how they're going to restart. And some of them are wondering how am I going to deal with my cash flow issues? And we already talked to a few bankruptcy lawyers that are expecting, insolvency issues, by July and August, with companies realizing I need some bankruptcy protection here because, I need 6 months to a year to get back on track. And you're probably expecting the same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually insolvent companies go to someone like, Opus Consulting, what you do, Jacques, first before they come to us necessarily. And because they need some help, they want to, write off some debt, restructure, even just operational restructuring. Well, maybe we don't need this division anymore or this vertical because it's just costing us money. So how do we shut down? But what folks have told me is that because of the extent of the economic shutdown, a lot of times there aren't good answers. I mean, let me take a step back. There are good answers. There's no answers that anyone want to hear, because really there are no true magic bullets. And even bankruptcy, I've been a bankruptcy attorney since 1992. But even in bankruptcy, yes, there are things that sometimes can help a company. But at the end of the day, I remember it was a conference and someone said, the problem with bankruptcy is you really can't go into it without having a lot of money, because it's expensive. Like the Chapter 11 process is expensive because of all the attendant fees and costs and hearings and whatnot. And I think at the end of the day, whereas maybe in years past, there was a lot more liquidity in the market, and I'm talking about non-cannabis market. And so there would be exit financing or financing during the course of the bankruptcy. That's dried up, or there's like 50 times more people who need to access that. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of companies, small, medium, large, blue chip, probably go into bankruptcy, and where in years past they may have either restructured their debt or been acquired by like a private equity firm or whatnot. I think a lot will end up liquidating, like what's happening in the Pier 1 bankruptcy right now, where at the end of the day, there's nothing there to salvage, unfortunately.
Well, Scott, thank you for joining us. Right, we're trying to keep the format pretty short, so because we all have the attention span of squirrels. So
well, as you knew, I could just talk forever. So.
Yep. That's been great, Scott. If people are interested in learning more about you, your background, and your services, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So you go to the Burns and Levinson website and look up Scott Moskal. My email is smoskal, so SMOSKOL @burnslev.com. I think that's the best way. I could give up my cell, but that's probably not advisable.
There you go. Well, yeah, we do appreciate the time spending us with today, talking about reinventing business, and obviously touching on the topics we did today. So we're looking forward to having you on again when the world changes once again, and we're here having the same conversation, but in a different context.
Yes. Thanks, Scott. And then for people who actually joined us, we'll catch you on the next episode of Reinvent New England. Thanks, Scott.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys. Glad you're doing good, Scott.